Okay, I am recording the session now. Okay, so this is a Padlet. We'll be working from this. So when I refer to something, you can see it on the Padlet, which is like an interactive storyboard, and you make comments in the Padlet using the plus key. So either take a photograph of that and use it on your phone, or I will copy and paste the link for the Padlet. That's probably the easiest way. It just means that link is there if you want to refer back to it. Okay, so you should get the link for the Padlet. Have a quick. Yes, you've got a question there. Somebody put their hand up. If you've got a question, put it in the chat or just ask. Good. Okay, so that's what we'll be working from during this session. So you'll know this. You'll reference to bring in the external sources, the secondary sources, which will be used by other experts in the field to support your piece of research or to support your research question. And they're the two main components of referencing. So the citation is cited within the body of the text. Okay, that argues, supports, explains key points. The reference list is the full publication details for each resource, and that's provided in a full reference list at the end. Okay, so within the text you have your citation, you just have the author's name or the publication name and the date of publication within the text, and that's expanded on at the end under the reference list. So the reader should be able to, or your lecturer should be able to have a look at what's referenced within the text and then go straight to the end and check that it's there. So the majority of students at GCU use Harvard referencing system, but check with your lecturer. So when you're given a report, it should state on the report, on the coursework brief, what the referencing style is. And if not, then ask. So this is some of the terminology, and as we go through it, we can see some examples. So the citation appears in the main body when you quote or paraphrase, usually the author's surname and date. So I'm sure you've been told so far, or it's within your coursework brief, to keep the quotations to a minimum. Okay, keep quotations to a minimum. Can you put in the chat why you think quotations should be minimized? Why do you think your coursework shouldn't be flooded with too many quotations? Any ideas? Okay, so when you bring a quote in, because we need to do a research of our own. Yes, good. You need to do your own research, and also if you put a quote in, it can be used when you're putting something across that can't be explained in another way. However, if you use too many quotations, it means all you're doing is cutting and pasting quotes, sticking them in, and the writer's voice, now you're the writer, the writer's voice isn't able to come through, and it just means you're filling it up with, basically filling up the word count. So you'll see the citation there on this slide's example. Engau and Hoffman, brackets 2011, illustrate the diversity in the way. So the writer's voice, your voice is coming through there because you're explaining the diversity, and you're showing that Engau and Hoffman are using their work to illustrate the diversity in the way, etc. So at the end, you will have their full reference, and there's different ways of incorporating it, and we'll go on to that. Plagiarism, the practice of taking somebody else's work or ideas and passing them off as your own. And we'll go on to the next slides about what constitutes plagiarism. And then, as we just mentioned, the quotation uses exactly the same words as found in text, and our referencing is presented with quotation marks. They're the inverted commas, and that makes the difference there. And then when you're paraphrasing, you are taking the you're taking the author's work and you're putting it into your own words, and then you're acknowledging those words with the author's name and date of publication. Yes, quote if you want to use the author's words sparingly, paraphrase if you want to keep similar length, summarize if you want to make the text shorter, so you can maybe summarize a sentence, synthesize when you are using different sources from different places and putting them all together in possibly one slightly longer sentence or a paragraph. In all cases, you need to acknowledge the author's work with references. Always got to be. So by postgraduate level, your referencing must be meticulous. It must be really precise and exact. So make sure there's a space after the commas. Make sure there's spaces. Make sure when you open a bracket, you close it. Make sure if you do use a quote that you're using inverted commas, both sets of inverted commas. And make it consistent throughout the text, because a decent proportion of your overall mark will be given to the use of referencing, grammar, and formatting of the text. So that might be up to 10% you want to get. So what you need to reference: any quotes, any paraphrasing, any mentions of another thinker, mentions of another author, anything that's not your original thought. If you draw an original conclusion from a common fact, you must cite the source, all tables, diagrams, and illustrations. Okay, why do you reference the sources? You need sources to support your points. So essentially, when you have an assignment question, when you have a research question, you are researching something and you are finding the answers to something, or you're exploring a specific topic. The answers for that and the research comes from the authors. Okay, so you are incorporating the other author's work with your own interpretation of what it says, and we'll look at a few examples in the Padlet. So essentially, it is a mixture. It is a good mixture. It's a sort of a discussion between an author's points of view and the research they have done, and it's your interpretation of it. So you avoid the plagiarism by acknowledging other works you've consulted for assignment purposes, and you also need to demonstrate why you think a source is important enough to be included in your assignment. So be careful not to put in the odd sentence or to put in the odd paraphrase or a quote that doesn't add anything. So always at the forefront should be the question or the research question that you are seeking to answer, and then all the points surrounding it should back up what you're saying. So they're there for a purpose. So don't provide collections of sources without explaining each one. So when you integrate a source, it is putting forward, it is adding on to what you're saying. Okay, there's a pictorial format. Direct quotes, paraphrase text or ideas, data from a source, used directly in visualizations or images and photographs that are not your own. And throughout the end of this, we'll have a look at Cite Them Right. Okay, so how to include a source, and then you need to ask yourself, what does a quote add to your work? The author's voice should be labeled every few sentences. Now we'll go into that in slide 11. So remind the reader who is speaking, because within your paragraphs or within your report sections, there should be a difference or a combination of you're the writer, of your interpretation of what's been put forward and the actual paraphrase from the author. So the paragraph should contain the author as well as the writer's voice. And the argument or point should be presented in the writer's voice, which is you, and supported by reference to an author. With words like "this demonstrates that." Okay, there's one useful phrase there. So if you're bringing a source in, you need to show how important it is, and the terminology you use will demonstrate that important. Okay, this is slide 11. So you can incorporate an in-text citation two ways: by incorporating the citation as part of a sentence or at the end of a sentence. So you'll see the first one, it says Wayne 2020. And then we're going to have a look on the Padlet after this. One such example is where Wayne, brackets 2020, you see the brackets comes after the surname. They're not together. Is where Wayne states the majority of students in Scottish higher education are home students. However, data also suggests that Scottish universities have a globally diverse population. Supporting this view, Ray 2019 notes, etc., etc., etc. And then it says at the end, similarly, 13% of students in Scotland are from non-EU countries. Marshall, comma, I think that says 2020. So that is called author prominent. See, the author comes first, and then at the end there you have a paraphrase, and then it's Marshall 2020. That's called information prominent, because the information comes first. So you have the paraphrase that comes first, and then Marshall 2020, both within the bracket. And at the start there, we've got Wayne, you have got that's author prominent. So the author comes first. And you should kind of mix the way that you're doing them. Vary your style of integrating sources. So if you click in the Padlet, now I will put the Padlet link up again for anybody who arrived late. So remember, there are two ways. You've got author prominent, which means the author comes first, like Wayne, or information prominent, which is both put in brackets and comes at the end. So if you look on go onto the Padlet, go on to, just click on, move along to the right where it says academic articles, click on BIM training construction and bring the article up. Go up to the top of the article. I just want to see if we can find examples of information and author prominent. I think I need my glasses for this. So look at the introduction. Has everybody got it? If you look at the introduction, you look through all the referencing, the references. So can you put in the chat, under introduction, which line you can see the first citation, the first reference to other authors? Which line is it? So under introduction, which line is it? Type in the chat which line you're on. Okay, so it's the article BIM training on the Padlet. Scroll down, go to introduction, have a quick look at the introduction and put in the chat which line you can find the first reference in. Okay, anybody got it? Are you managing to access the Padlet? Okay, does anybody want to put in the chat which line in the introduction you can find your first reference? Well, I've found it. It's in line 4. Okay, so can you let me know whether you can actually access the Padlet? Because I don't want to continue with using the Padlet if you can't access it. You should be able to. Can you access the Padlet? Okay, I will continue then. I'm assuming you can access it. Okay, and please do put comments in the chat. Okay, and there we have it again. 2 ways to insert your in-text citations. Identify within the sentence, author prominent. So Akintola et al. Criticize the lack of theoretical perspectives, etc. Additionally, Yang and Lee 2018. So you can see when you introduce the author prominent first, that means that there's more, you're better able to introduce the way your interpretation of it. And the reason you can do that is by looking at the reporting verbs. So the first one there is criticize, and then analysed. So the strength of the reporting verbs, which you'll also see in the Padlet, will go quite far into putting forward your perspectives. But there's more of your writer's voice coming into that. And then the other version, which I talked about, was identify at the end, information prominent. So in his view, there's a quote there, and at the very end, Smith, 2009, page 37. And then you have the last one, and the author comes at the end, Cohen 2000, Gonzalez 2013. Okay, so that'll be a paraphrase or a summary, and then you have the author's name after that. Okay, so when you're reading all your sources, you will be paraphrasing it. So paraphrasing can be quite challenging because you have a lot of information to read and you're never quite sure what's important, what's not important, and you have to try and synthesize and integrate all the material from your sources into your writing in much, much less text. So, number one, understand the text. If you don't understand it, if it contains some kind of terminology that you're not aware of or that you don't like or whatever, don't use that source, go and find another one. Read it, turn your head away from the text, write down a few notes about what you think, your interpretation of what's in it, go back to the text, read the text again, turn away and write notes. And that has been shown to be much more effective than rather reading the text, and if you had it on paper, underlining it and highlighting it. To turn away from the text and either speaking out loud to yourself how much you can understand of it or making a few notes. And then at the end, you gather your notes together. Okay, and then you compare your paraphrased text with the original passage and make any minor adjustments, because it is your interpretation of what you're reading that's important. It's not just rewriting it in the author's style. You're rewriting in your own style. Do not patchwork. Patchwork means getting bits and pieces of sentences from different articles and stitching them. Okay, you got a question? If anybody's got a question, put it in the chat. Somebody put their hand up. So sometimes if you just get a sentence and then put it into ChatGPT, or if you put it into Google Translate, or if you put it into any of these things, something else comes up, but it doesn't necessarily mean the same because the interpretation is not the same. So substituting synonyms does not display the author's argument, because there are so many different synonyms, have the kind of different meanings. So paraphrasing involves 4 changes. So it's the words that you use, the structure, such from passive to active, pick only the important elements, presentations of other people's ideas. So I will put a sentence here in active. So just to remind you, this is my one example I always use. So the dog bit the man is in the active voice. If you want to turn it into passive, which means turning it around, making the subject into the object, do you know how you would write it? Can anybody want to put in the chat what they would write if it was a passive voice? So that's active. The dog bit the man. And use of the passive voice is quite is more apparent in academic writing. So the dog bit the man. And there it is in the passive voice. The man was bitten by the dog. So changing from active to passive is something else you can do when you're paraphrasing. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? This is an interactive session. So if you have questions, I'm here to answer them, particularly if it's to do with any aspect of an assignment that you're doing. Any questions? Okay, so don't mine the sources for sentences you like, then paraphrase them and stitch them together. Don't take sentences from the abstract or just the first paragraph because you think they're most important. Do consider the purpose and impact of your work. So how many of you have used Cite Them Right? Because I don't want to show you how to use it or show where it is if you've already used it. It's the guide to referencing. Have you used Cite Them Right? Okay. In that case, we're in slide 16. In that case, I will bring it up and then I'll share the screen. It is an invaluable tool, particularly when referencing must be exact. So if you give me 2 seconds. Okay, so I will bring up I'm now sharing it. Okay, go to the GCU library, type in Cite Them Right. Now I will have to change screens in a minute. Cite Them Right. Okay, go to the top there, you'll see database, click on it. And you've got Cite Them Right there, and this is where I have to, this is where you need a login. Okay, so I'll share the other screen because you need to log in there, so you can always log in with your, obviously with your GCU. Okay, so when you've gone to the GCU library, typed in Cite Them Right, bring up the database, and there you have Cite Them Right. Choose your referencing style. Okay, so we'll click on that one. Harvard, APA, IEEE. We'll click on the Harvard referencing. Okay, it tells you how to reference everything. Digital and internet, websites and web pages with individual authors. Okay, so that is your go-to tool for referencing. So if there's anything you want to know how to reference, go to Cite Them Right, because it'll answer all the questions you've got on that. Okay, and that's within the GCU library. So I will share the PowerPoint again. Okay, so then within the text there, so we're back to the PowerPoint. So the mechanics of a citation. When citing a source, you need to state the author's surnames first and then the year. Okay, you'll see the single author there, Bailey, comma, space 2015. If it was at the end, if it was information prominent, you'd have the brackets around it. Okay, so it's Bailey. So don't use the initials, and obviously don't put web references in. So you just need the surname and the date of publication. You put the page number in if there is something there specifically that the reader can go and identify. And then up to 3 authors, Rowley, Lee and Young, and then more than 3 authors is et al. If it's an organization, World Health Organization, you need to put brackets around part or all of your citation. So make sure that your citations are up to date. Make sure that they are good citations, and that's why good resources that have been tried and tested and peer reviewed, etc. Which is why you don't go into Google and find student blogs or anything, because you don't know who wrote them. You don't know how reliable the information is. These are really good. Reporting verbs are used when you report or refer to another writer's work. They're needed to connect the in-text citation to the information you're citing. So if you go back to the Padlet, there should be reporting verbs there. Okay, if you drag along and go right along to the Padlet, you will see way along at the end on the right hand side reporting verbs. So use them because the strength of what you're trying to say can be determined by the strength of your reporting verb, because stated is quite flat and neutral. Agreed is positive. Criticized is negative. So there are very many reporting verbs, and they can be used really well and make quite a good difference to your work if you vary the use of your reporting verb. Example, Gray 2023 insists that reporting verbs. That means I feel quite strongly about it. Okay, the academic voice. It is important not only to present ideas, facts and conclusions, but also have a point of view or stance. And then the voice, the academic voice it's the way of distinguishing between your thoughts and words and those of the author. So you must include your own voice in your analysis and ideas, and all your sources must relate to your thesis. So the academic voice is you showing how important that source is by using words like this shows that, or this demonstrates that, or the point put forward by Gray brackets 2023 is an indication that. So the way your interpretation of it comes through in your voice. And there'll be something about that in the Padlet as well. So you've got a piece of coursework to do. You've got assignments to do. So the writer's voice, and that's your voice, is strongest in introduction and conclusion of a paragraph. Best not to begin or end your work referencing another writer's word. So when you start off, when you're doing your introduction, you lay the facts bare, okay? And you put forward the thesis, the main topic sentence. You put forward what you're looking for and what you're researching, what you aim to answer. Okay, so that's the important thing. That's what the whole thing is about. And then the sources come after that. So other voices, because if you started off with a quote, you're immediately putting in somebody else's words, and then that doesn't really add anything to it. So other voices should feature in the body paragraphs to provide evidence and support your ideas, claims, and arguments. So the first sentence, for example, will be the topic sentence, and then the next ones will be, and we're doing this next week, we'll be doing examples and evidence. Examples and evidence from secondary sources. Okay, so you use your voice to manage and contextualize the voices of others. That's the writing voice. And reporting verbs and connectors are useful, so that's again in the Padlet. So clearly distinguish between your voice and the voices of other authors and cite each source appropriately, which is why it's really important not to just stitch sentences together. So each sentence has a meaning. So if you think about it, you're alternating sometimes between what you say and what your interpretation of the facts and what the author says. So it's kind of like a discussion. Yeah. So readers assume that words without citations are your own. If they're not, you must cite them. Okay. So there's anything that's not your own work, then you must cite it. Okay. So the various strategies. So SCEBE tends to focus on the re-articulation of core information and knowledge in the context of the current work. So you're re-articulating the core information that you have in your sources in the context of your own work. Okay, and then you use information and author prominent methods to introduce concepts. And as we mentioned before, the information prominent is where the information comes first. So emphasize the information rather than the author. And its citations follow ideas when using the strategy. So there's the example there. So that's the information comes first, and then you have the citation at the end, Smith 2020. And that's the further example. I actually think we've had that one. 2 ways of inserting in-text citations. You have the first one there, the author prominent. So think about it when you're going back to your work, when you go back to your coursework, have a look at the various voices, as it were, that you're introducing the text, and kind of like you might want to, I don't know, highlight them on the screen and see what they're doing and see what purpose they're bringing. See what purpose they're bringing to your work. Are you using them? Are you criticizing them? Are you using one author to agree or disagree or support another author? Well, what is their function? That's really important. Okay, and last and not least, be organized. So it can be hard to remember what your arguments are and what came from the text. So from the very beginning, I mean, I'm sure if you arrived here in January, maybe even a very short while ago, you're getting to grips with a whole different way of using the technology. There's a big, huge database, and there's lots of resources online. And it can be quite challenging sometimes remembering where everything is. So be organized from the start. Make a note of specific significant page numbers, authors, work title, years of publication. Use RefWorks. Okay. If you haven't used it, RefWorks is the referencing software tool within the GCU library. And it's fantastic. It will create references for you from the text within the library. Okay. If you don't know how to use it, type in GCU library RefWorks. So there's lots of tutorials on it, there's videos, or you can go and work it out yourself. But it's useful to watch videos. There's no shortage of help and support out there. Okay, the list of references should be in alphabetical order at the end. So you've got your reference list page on a completely separate page, the same font and the same typeface as your original text. Surname of the publication, not the way that they appear in the text. And there I've got it again, GCU Library Workshops, including RefWorks. And I will click on it, just as I mentioned. Okay, workshops on RefWorks within the GCU Library, they're really good. So it will save you a lot of anguish. Here we have ChatGPT. Okay, so the university has a policy on it. So first and foremost, you don't type in an assignment question into ChatGPT and then get the answer out and then stick that in as your assignment. That doesn't work. And I'm sure you're well aware of this. So you're learning from a data set with limited knowledge, and assessments we find it difficult to answer. It doesn't generally generate citations or references. Quite often they're made up. It's limited. So working now in highly specialized areas may not be accurate. And it struggles with critical analysis. And essentially, it can be fine for gaining ideas and for looking for little bits and pieces. But apart from that, it's not advisable. Okay, you may feel that you're under a bit of pressure now, so anticipate the pressure, especially midterm, which is near enough. We're nearly halfway then, right before the end of the semester, when the coursework can pile up. Ask for help from your lecturer. Make an appointment with your academic advisor. Seek academic support from the librarian if you're looking to research something, or from the LDC. Manage your time effectively. Okay, so we've come to the end, and I put my email address up, which is already on the slide. Okay, and I will stop recording.